Retroid Pocket 3 has finally arrived, and with it comes a new widescreen display, better controls, and some much needed refinements to the original Retroid Pocket 2 design. Now, this isn't Retroid's first time around, and is well known in the retro handheld circle for their popular 2 Plus, which was an incredibly affordable and solid performer for its price point. I was excited to put my pre-order in minutes of the page going live to secure a retro-colored Pocket 3, which shipped as promised on its release date of August 20th. For the channel, I am particularly excited to feature a device that comes in at a very different price point than some of the other handhelds that I have talked about so far on this channel. So what does the Retroid Pocket 3 offer, and how does it follow up to the enormous success of the Pocket 2 Plus? Please join me, Rob, the Retro Tech Dad, as I take a look at the new Pocket 3 from Retroid. First, let's get to know the Retroid Pocket 3 and learn its specs. The device features a 4.7-inch 16:9 touchscreen display at 750 by 1334 resolution. It features the Unisoc quad-core Tiger T310. It is available with 2 gigs or 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigabytes of internal storage. Additionally, it contains the option to expand with a microSD slot. It also comes pre-installed with Android 11. The handheld has a 4000 mAh battery and supports fast charging. The device comes at launch in 6 different colors. Pricing, which I'm basing on what's listed on Retroid's website, is $119 for the 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of storage configuration, and $129 for the 3 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of storage configuration. Alright, so let's get this cardboard box open first. And surprisingly, I was sent all these extras in the box. Now apparently, all orders placed in August and September will receive the membrane kit and memory card, and I didn't realize that, so that's a cool little bonus. Now I'm still undecided if I will try those out based on how I like the default setup. By the way, check out Retro Handheld's teardown of the Retroid Pocket 3 and repairability, which might give some of you pause about doing the swap. Anyways, digging all this stuff out of here so we can get to the main event. Nothing like a box in a box. Well, here it is, the Retroid Pocket 3. And as you can see here, I got this in the retro color with the 3 gigs of RAM. Okay, so time to cut the seal on this thing, nice and smooth. Definitely like the magnetic fold-out packaging. It's quite slick and a step up for devices in this price segment. Here we have the usual cheapo instruction manual that I will never read, and a standard USB Type-C cable, and nothing else. Ooh, a screen protector is included with the Pocket 3. Finally, let's undress. Just slide it nice and slow out of its plastic prison. That's quite a handsome device. I really like this retro color. It is a first for me, and normally I would have went with something like the Indigo, but I was in the mood for something a little different. Taking a look at the stacked digital shoulder buttons, they are very solid, with a quiet clickiness, and I am able to press them down from any location, which is nice. I am not noticing any sticking or poor button travel. The D-pad is interesting and seems to pivot well with a light clickiness. It also doesn't make much noise. It's not quite a thick and mushy D-pad. Here we have what looks like a Switch Lite style analog stick with the L3 click-in ability, finally. You can see that the analog stick is recessed and pretty flush with the front of the device. On top we have the power, mini HDMI port, and the very awkwardly placed start and select, which I am slowly growing accustomed to. On the right side is the home button. And checking out the back side, here is the rear grille, and this device is passively cooled with a large aluminum heatsink, which we will peek a look at later. You can quickly see that the downward firing stereo speakers, 3.5mm and USB Type-C port, along with the microSD slot, are all on the bottom of the unit. A small warning, don't be like me and rush to throw your microSD card in the slot because you're too excited to play with your new Retroid Pocket 3. I accidentally stuck the card in the space between the shell and the tray and now have to take the back off to get it out. So I guess this is when we get to undress the Retroid Pocket 3 and peek at the aluminum heatsink and some of the internals. Okay, so let's take this back cover off quickly. Here is the massive aluminum heatsink. And you can see here where I accidentally placed the microSD card. Everything looks really nice and solid. I'm pretty impressed with the build quality. I really like the action of the rear triggers. I think the mechanism makes for a very satisfying click. Now time for the weigh-in. The Retroid Pocket 3 comes in at a very light 8.25 ounces or 234 grams. Now how does the Retroid Pocket 3 look compared to some other well-known quantities in terms of size and dimensions? Here you can see the 2 Plus, the 3, and the regular Nintendo Switch lined up in order of size based on width, with the Switch naturally being the largest. The Switch is a big boy and needs to make some room to fit the shot here with the Pocket 3. And finally, the 2 Plus, which is not as wide because of its 4x3 display. Okay, so let's turn this device on. I really do love the new boot sequence with a nod to Donkey Kong Country. And as always, we are prompted here with the Android setup screen with some modifications made by Retroid for a smoother user experience. During the setup process, you can choose which apps you want pre-installed before you get into Android, so take the time to look through the list. I definitely recommend apps like Dolphin for Handheld. Then you have a choice to select the standard Android interface or Retroid Launcher, which I do like for its simplicity. Now keep in mind you can always choose the Android interface later if you decide it's not your thing. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about the display here and just the overall build quality. The panel is really crispy, really bright, and has a nice vibrancy. The device to me feels better built compared to the 2 Plus, and for its price point is nicely constructed. I am not noticing any kind of flexing in the shell or plastic. All of the buttons work correctly and are fully responsive to my input. Again, no weird sticking or poor finishing on the plastic. So let's briefly take a look at the Retroid Launcher. Now if you have a 2 Plus, this should be a very familiar experience to you. I really like the Retroid Launcher here because it provides a very simple interface for someone not as experienced with configuring front ends. The interface is easy to use and simple enough for a layperson to navigate. You can choose which systems you want to display on the launcher screen, so I will just pick Gamecube as an example. Additionally, you can add individual apps that you might want to have here in the Retroid Launcher, so I will quickly add some of my favorite apps here like Duckstation and Ether SX2. You can see that the added apps are now all visible here. Now going back to the Gamecube that I added to the launcher, we can go to the console and easily add ROMs by telling the launcher where the directory is. It will automatically scan, scrape, and then add the games to the launcher. Easy peasy. Just like with the XP Plus, I am very happy to see that Google Play and the Google Play services are included here and working great. No need to sideload anything. Okay, so naturally, this being an Android device, we should probably do a few Android gaming tests. First up, and I told you, I will be featuring this one a lot, is Horizon Chase, the Outrun-inspired arcade racing game that apparently is getting a sequel which will be exclusive to Apple. I'm really upset about that. As you can see, this game looks great on the new widescreen display. I used to play this one a bit on my 2 Plus, but this one is so much nicer to look at now. In particular, text is much sharper and easier to read. Moving on to another Android game that I love, and an excellent native port of Streets of Rage 4. Again, this game looks so much better on this display and is really showing that if you have any interest in the vast amount of Android games, this display will be better suited for that experience. Finally, a game that is a little more demanding and one that I've been wanting to feature because of my love for that game company. Sky was not quite there at full 30 frames per second, but in low resolution mode, I was getting around 20 frames per second according to the overlay, which seems accurate. Despite this, it's still fairly playable and pretty cool if you just happen to have your Pocket 3 on you and you want to play a little Sky. And coming to emulation now, let's start with something easier for the Retroid Pocket 3. Here I have the amazing side-scrolling shmup from Square, Einhänder, which is playing here easily at 2x resolution with a widescreen hack, and as you can see, looks great on this display with no issues. Moving on to PSP, and really where the improvements to the Retroid Pocket 3 will benefit the most, PSP overall is quite smooth on this device. The biggest thing now is that we can properly display PSP games at 16:9. Now I have tested games from all sorts of ranges here, and as you can see, something lighter like Loco Roco here running at 2x resolution performs well, and it looks so good on this display. Really beautiful. Next up is one of my absolute favorite racing games and always a good time. You can see that Outrun 2006 is pretty smooth overall. This one is running at native resolution and still looks very good on the display. And of course, finally, the popular benchmark game makes a return here, and at native resolution with an auto frame skip on, the game does pretty decently. Again, this device is going to be really decent up to the PSP. Now let's try some harder emulation in what I would consider to be a bonus on a device like the Retroid Pocket 3. Here is Wind Waker running at 0.7x resolution, and like with the 2 Plus, hangs out around the 30 frames per second. It's pretty playable on this device, and with the widescreen hack looks pretty decent. Now Dolphin for handheld is definitely responsible for a lot of the decent performance we see here with the game running at 0.7x resolution and with performance hacks checked off as shown here. Again, to me, Gamecube is a bonus, so don't expect to play the entire library here flawlessly. Now my daughter was kind enough to join me and help me test Wind Waker side by side with the 3 and the 2 Plus. And as you can see, and of course by no means meant to be scientific here, the performance is pretty much identical between both devices.
Press A to roll.
Okay.
See how I'm doing it?
I like derpy.
So hit roll,
Okay.
there you go. Alright, let's go across here. You see this part here? The plank there,
Okay.
Now moving on to another bonus console for emulation, we have the PlayStation 2. Thanks to Ether SX2, we can play a decent number of games here on the Retroid Pocket 3. Now you can definitely forget about the demanding titles like God of War and Shadow of the Colossus, but lighter 2D fare will do decently, and games that are heavily optimized like Final Fantasy X should be pretty decent. Here is GigaWing Generations playing well here with no issues. And lastly, here's a weird one, Akira Psychoball, which got an English translation for our friends in Europe. This game is inspired by the Akira anime, and it has you battling in pinball form, traveling from your side to your opponent's side in an attempt to take them out. It's a really interesting gameplay mechanic, and I like this one a lot despite being pretty terrible at it, and as you can see, it plays great here. So naturally, after playing some games, I figured it would be a good time to do a heat test. Here you can see I still have Sky running, which is a decently demanding Android game. Moving around the shell, I did not really observe surface temps of over 35 degrees Celsius. Now being a passively cooled device, the handheld doesn't seem to get too hot here. And as with any new device, I had to do a battery test to see what kind of performance we're looking at here. And with Wind Waker, which I would consider to be the more demanding test at 50% brightness and 50% volume, we came in at just over 5 hours. Not bad at all. For my lighter test, I did Yoshi's Island running at 50% brightness and volume with no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and battery saver mode on when prompted at 20%. I just got under 9 hours, and considering the size of the device and battery, it's quite good. Now the XP Plus still holds the title for the best battery I've tested, but again, they're very different devices. So naturally, one will want to see how this compares to the Pocket 2 Plus. And these are some of the key areas where the 3 is an improvement over the 2 Plus. The screen quality is much better here, the color accuracy, vibrancy, and just overall crispiness of the display is superior. Text is easier to read, and in particular, Android and PSP gaming will really shine on this device. Widescreen hacks also become an option now. Despite the device being a little wider, it is now slightly thinner and the analog sticks are much more recessed, which still allows the device to be quite pocketable. Now I'm a pretty skinny guy, and I do like my skinny shorts, and you can see that it fits in my pocket with ease, and doesn't look ridiculous like my XP Plus hanging out here in my pocket. And of course, Retroid finally gave us analog sticks that have the click-in functionality with L3 and R3, and the right analog stick is no longer that stupid slider and is a huge improvement over the 2 Plus. Overall, I think the build quality is better here, and the device feels very solid in the hand. I really like the curved and rounded edges, and again, it just feels nice in the hands. The device includes Android 11, and with it comes both the good and bad of Android 11. However, this is a much more up-to-date experience and has some of the newer interface gestures that is featured part of Android 11. By the way, you can go back to the standard Android 9 navigation by changing your gestures in settings. There was a confusion that Android 11 would mean better performance for the Retroid Pocket 3, but I believe this is for the OS experience and not for gaming necessarily. Finally, the 2 Plus and the 3 do share the same processor and 4000 mAh battery, so performance here is not an unknown quantity. We know what to expect with that Tiger T310 and also the overall battery performance. Now, like my XP Plus video, I think that this will be something I continue to include in all of my videos featuring in-depth looks at products. The reason why I like this section is because I want to leave you, the viewer, with something to think about, or in other words, things to consider. I believe it's not my role to convince you that a product is right for you. Instead, I much prefer taking the stance of demonstrating what a product can do and showing you the product. With that being said, you might be here watching this video because you have a curiosity about the Retroid Pocket 3, and maybe you are considering upgrading from the 2 Plus, or you are looking for a device that comes in at this price point. So if you do own a 2 Plus, should you upgrade? Well, performance here is well known. You get a much nicer widescreen display, full analog stick capabilities, and what I feel to be a superior build quality. Now, is that worth an upgrade? Well, it really comes down to what you want from this device. If you want to play more Android games and like using widescreen hacks or being able to play PSP at the correct aspect ratio, this will be a nice fit. On the other hand, if you already own a 2 Plus, the 3 might not bring enough to the table to compel you to upgrade, as you can still enjoy the same things on that device. For those completely new to the Retroid line, the 3 would be my choice over the 2 Plus. I think the extra money does warrant the improvements. Now, I do plan on doing some deep dives into emulation and Android gaming with the Retroid Pocket 3 in the future, despite the Tiger T310 being well known around the community. As I mentioned, I'd rather show what the device can do and let you decide if it's something that meets your needs. So what do you want to see in the future for my in-depth looks? I am trying to establish a metric for future videos so that there is a consistency and to make sure I don't miss areas that might be important to you, the viewer. Please let me know down in the comments. This is Rob, the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.